Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm so excited for you to meet my guests today. I have on the show Garth and Caroline Gustafson, which if you don't know them, you're about to get to know them and hear their incredible journey from being the most normal American 20-year-olds into what has now become 14 years of long-term work and being missionaries in Southeast Asia in the beautiful country of Cambodia. So I'm so excited for you to hear from them a little bit about their journey. They're going to talk about their life and their experiences from their early 20s into now what has become a huge hub of missions in all of Southeast Asia. And they have built that. But they're going to talk about how they built that. Because as all of us know who walk with God, there's the dream and then there's the process towards the dream. And so they're going to break down their processes, and they're going to talk about some of the ways and some of the things that have kept them on the path to the life that they're now living, which you'll hear at the end of the podcast. They say almost weekly to each other, I can't believe we get to live this life. And so if you're somebody who longs to be able to wake up happy with your life and full of joy, I think this podcast is going to be extra special for you. They talk about the gospel, what it really means. They talk about laying down your life, saying yes to God, listening to God, obeying God, and then hanging on for a dear life to see what God does. So I'm so excited for you to meet these friends of mine. They've been in Cambodia for 14 years. We've been friends for over 16 years when I was a missionary in Cambodia, and when I was a missionary in Thailand, between Thailand and Kona. They were there in Cambodia and Kona as well. So there's a lot of friendship here. There's a lot of stories here. And I can vouch for these two that they're the real deal. And I cannot wait for you to hear their journey with God to Cambodia. So enjoy this podcast with Garth and Caroline Gustafson. So we can start formally with John Ripsua.
Jim Ripsua.
And what's the informal one? Suxabai.
Suxabai.
There
you go. Wow.
I remember it.
Yeah.
And I think I remember thank you or delicious is akun. Which one?
Akun.
Akun is thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is delicious?
Chiang.
Chiang. Okay. For everybody who's listening, we're speaking Khmer. We are speaking Khmer. There are two people in the room that are fluent in Khmer. There's one person who knows three things, and you just heard them. Okay, so to start with, there's so many things I want to talk to you guys about. We all know each other originally from YWAM.
Yep.
Our days in YWAM.
Mm-hmm.
Garth and I go back about 16 years. I think when I entered YWAM, you had just gone to Cambodia. I think you were on your Cambodian outreach when I first joined YWAM in Kona.
Okay.
And where we want to talk about that. And then Caroline, we missed each other until your SBS, I think, which is School of Biblical Studies. Mm-hmm. But our point of origin is all Kona, Hawaii, and YWAM. And from there, which God is so cool, he just takes us forward, but we stay connected.
Yeah.
And Garth and Caroline are long-term missionaries. Does it get annoying, though, to be called a missionary? Because it probably doesn't even feel like that anymore. Does it feel like home?
Yeah.
Cambodia?
Definitely.
Because I was thinking about that yesterday because they were sharing at the church and about Cambodia and their life there. And I was thinking you're not really missionaries anymore in the sense of that probably feels more like home than here.
Yeah.
Do you think? Is that right?
For sure.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it?
I feel like when we come back to the States, in fact, there's times where I need to readjust to the culture that I grew up in just because it has changed so much since my childhood. So definitely Cambodia is home. And that's how we even talk about Cambodia. It's home.
Yeah.
Versus America.
Yeah. Which is pretty amazing because it could be so easy to just so many people I feel like are here and there. And it's planting is a big thing, planting somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so let's backtrack to Cambodia. And so Garth, you go to Cambodia. Oh, first of all, you've been married how many years?
10.
Yeah. 10 years?
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness. 10 years.
You guys were at our wedding.
We were at your wedding. Yes. It was so fun. It was so fun. The whole gang was together. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Uh-huh. Okay, so you've been married 10 years. You have two kids.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Lila and Gunnar. Mm-hmm. Lila's 8 now. Gunner's 5. Yep. So Gunnar and Jude are 9 days apart.
Yeah.
And you've raised them. They've lived in Cambodia their whole life, right?
Yeah. Born in Bangkok, but within a month.
Born in Bangkok, Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And now they are full. So this isn't really home to them at all, America.
No.
Do they like it?
They love it.
They do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They're like, when do we get to go home to Battambang?
Oh, yeah.
So,
what do they miss the most, do you think?
friends,
Yeah.
relationship, community.
Community.
Yeah,
Life at home, you know?
Yeah. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. So you guys have been married 10 years. You've got 2 kids. You're originally from Washington, Garth. Same Z's. Go Hawks.
There we go.
Caroline's from California. And is your family still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're all in our early 20s, taking separate journeys. And y'all's journey is so interesting. And I want to get into like the gritty parts of it because I want to at the end talk about how somebody who has a dream or a vision from God, how do you make that come to pass? Or how do you not make it come to pass, but let God make it come to pass? But let's backtrack all the way back to your early 20s, right? Like your kids, like we're all kids in YWAM. Like we're babies. Like I look at 21-year-olds now and I'm like, they're allowed to drive, right? Like they can drive. Like they're baby. We were babies, but we love God and we all show up in this organization because I went because I just wanted to know what else there was in life because I was kind of, over the status quo. Why did you guys choose a different path? Because you were going into law.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Originally, you were going to, because your dad's a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's a family business. And what was your family expectations, Caroline?
I actually went into YWAM directly after my high school graduation.
Okay.
With the expectation that after the 6 months of the discipleship training school, that I would be go right into university. So that was the expectation. Okay. However, it changed completely.
Oh, how we all go in with just 6 months to give.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
So was that your expectation of yourself, or your family's, or everyone's?
I think both.
Yeah.
It was just what was normal in the culture I grew up in. So never expected to be, in missions, and never expected that God would spark something in me that was dormant for so long.
Really?
That he just grasped and pulled out of my heart and allowed it to be reality.
So why did you go in?
To DTS?
Yeah. If you weren't even thinking missions long, you weren't thinking I'm going to be like in Cambodia for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You weren't even there.
Yeah, no, definitely
so
not.
So what made you go in?
Actually, my first exposure to YWAM, to missions, was as a 12-year-old. It was a ministry out of YWAM in LA called King's Kids. And
King's Kids, yeah.
And I just went on a youth camp with them, and I heard about the DTS, the Discipleship Training School. And I remember I promised myself that I would do this thing before I got married. Because I just thought, what a great experience it would be. But little did I know that experience would be the trajectory of my whole life. The direction of my whole life.
And how were you, 12?
I was 12 when I initially got introduced to YWAM.
And so you kind of made it thing in your own mind, like, I'm going to do this before I move on with like normal life.
Yeah, real life. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just do this 1 6 month thing. And you did it.
Yeah, I did it.
And so you went in, no boyfriend.
Yep.
No, you're just like, okay, this is what I always said I'd do.
Yeah.
First and last boyfriend.
Oh, and not proud of it at all, are you, Garth?
I mean, you asked, so I had to throw in the comment, So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You can pipe up whenever you want.
You'll have no problem.
Starting off a little quiet here, but I'll get it.
Keep sipping over there. Okay, so you go in and you're just like, okay, God, 6 months. This is what I always wanted to do.
Right.
So you loved God.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a normal kid at that point? Like a normal 19-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, really grew up in the church. Always wanted to make the right choice.
Yeah.
Never did anything bad per se. Didn't dabble in drugs or, that type of lifestyle. But it was definitely, looking back, very self-righteous.
Really?
Yeah. Very by works, by performance, by always being the good girl. And I think I prided myself in that. There was a lot of
always
pride.
Made right decisions.
Yeah. Right.
Always did the right thing.
Yeah. And even throughout my DTS, that was something that I was, there are so many kids that were taking the DTS with me that were coming from pasts that were really broken and, broken families, as well as, just choices that they had made along the road. Whereas I felt like, oh, wow, I'm better.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't have those problems. I didn't have those issues where my real issue was my pride.
Yeah.
And God had to really dismantle that.
Did that happen in that DTS?
Yeah.
For everybody who's listening, DTS is YWAM's discipleship training school. So before you go into missions with YWAM, you have to do a 5-month, sometimes 6-month now school. And that's what we're talking about now. So, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So you're looking around being like, oh, I'm ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And it really was until I was probably week 4 in this DTS that, just God really met me in such a real way to expose all the pride that I had built up that really kept me at a distance from others as well as from him.
How did it keep you at a distance from others?
Made me feel like, I think it just made me feel that I was in a, better.
Yeah.
So I don't associate with those people that are living in sin, that are making the wrong choices. Yeah. I'm better than them because I am making all the right choices.
Yeah.
And self-righteous indeed.
Yeah.
My
and doing it
right.
Self-righteous.
Yeah. Glad God dismantled that. Jeez.
Yeah.
That is real though.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even we see this within our own internship program. I've seen this in DTSs. We're so similar. We're scary similar. Taylor and I, my little sister.
You guys are a little.
We were talking last night and Taylor was like, oh my gosh, you and Caroline literally could be twins. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know.
I'm just the Asian version of you.
You're my Asian version. And if you could just give up your call, say no to God, and come be my best friend. That would be amazing. Yeah. But Taylor's my little sister who knows us both. She was laughing last night. She was like, it's kind of creepy. You and Caroline are so similar, but we are, because I was so that same way. I prided myself on my good decisions, my right standing, all workspace, which is why so many things meant so many things to me later as I learned oh my gosh, that is the worst of them all.
Yes.
It's pride and works.
Oh yeah.
It's way easier to bounce back from rock bottom than it is to bounce back from I earned this.
Yes. Yeah.
So creepy. Yes. So was there a person or a moment, or was it just God on, peeling
yeah, definitely. I believe, growing up in the church, I never knew that I could have a relationship with Jesus. I thought he was someone so distant, so far away. I didn't grow up in a church that was very spirit-led per se. So it was really through that discipleship training school that I had my first experience with understanding who the Holy Spirit was in my life to convict me, to actually repent.
Yeah.
Just taking me through steps of really recognizing the things that were keeping me away from God and coming to a place where I needed him. I fully needed to depend on him and his grace and really allowing that grace to walk it out in my day-to-day life. Because before it was the pride that was keeping me away from God.
People and God.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is so crazy.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you go on outreach?
I went to Fiji for 2 months. We were on an outer island, no electricity, no running water. And that's where I really felt a shift in just the trajectory of my life.
Really?
I don't know if I'm
going to
go back.
So it was Kona, Hawaii was God dealing with you. And then in Fiji, it's he started to...
Yeah, I realized that there's more to life than just my plans.
Oh, can you say that one more? Say it for the people in the back.
Yeah, no,
there is so much more to life.
Yeah, than my plans.
Your plans.
As well as the expectations that others may have had of me. That there is.
So you felt that too.
Yeah, that was that shift that, wow, maybe there is something out there in which the gifts that God has given to me, I can actually use that, not just to benefit myself, but for others, just because I saw so much, so many needs when I was in this village in Fiji, and so many people that were in a similar situation as with me growing up in the church, yet they didn't have a real relationship with Jesus.
So when you talk about, we'll get to you, Garth, just I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
I'm
I'm
very
fine.
captivated.
I'm fine listening to the two of
Very
you.
captivated.
It's quite enjoyable,
This is so
actually.
good.
It's all good.
Okay, so when you say the expectations of people, because I think that's a huge one for any, like that crosses every culture, everybody feels a pressure from somebody to be something, to do something, to walk something out. And so you have them on yourself. Yeah. Like, I'm going to do this with my life. Here's my plan. Right. So you get through the first phase of like, okay, God, like I can reconcile my plans and let them go. But then you have everybody else's expectations. Yes. And we have so many young people who so desperately want to follow what they feel and sense is God's like will for their life. But their family are 10 generation lawyers or 10 generation doctors or 10 generation own the car business or, and so how did you practically and spiritually reconcile what other people thought that you should do? Yeah. Because it sounds like in Fiji, you're starting to really feel like, oh my goodness, like I have something to give the world. Yeah. Honestly, I'm so grateful for the family that I grew up in. My parents, they're immigrants from South Korea. They grew up right after the Korean War ended. Wow. They never imposed on me that I need to be this or I expect you to have this kind of profession. It was more of what the world was telling me that I need to, that I need to at this age have this degree, and then at this age have this next degree, and then by this time make this amount of money, and then own a car, own a house at this point. Yep. So it was more of the culture that I grew up in that really shaped the plans that I thought were would equal success. Yep. But when I recognized it was totally selfish, those plans, it was then when I started to shift in how I talk to people about what I thought my life was going to be. I would say I started having more conversations with even my older sister and my parents about, I don't know if this is the route that I thought I was going was the right one for me in particular. So it started small for you. It wasn't like God told you like, you're going to be in Cambodia. No, it was a small step of obedience. Yeah. That's what it was. And it was taking that risk and leaning into him rather than sheltering myself of self-preservation of making sure that I'm still the Caroline that the world expected. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that all happens in Fiji. Yeah, it was, I sensed just a little inkling, but it was through that time in Fiji that I was out in the middle of the Pacific, just in the middle of nowhere that God was, speaking to that to me. So when you say that, like, you started to realize you had gifts, like, did those come, was it hard for you to recognize those? Or were you all of a sudden like, oh, wow, like I have something to offer? Yeah. How did that come about? I think gifts, I don't want to say it was like spiritual gifts per se. It was more of just like, wow, I grew up in the church. I have this great spiritual, I guess, background. In, legacy. Yeah, like in knowing, so for example, in this Fijian village, we were teaching children's Bible classes. And like these kids, they were illiterate, so they weren't able to read the Bible. So I was just sharing simple Bible stories to them, but they were able to soak it in, or even teaching English to them. I was like, wow, I grew up speaking English as my first language. I can totally use that to teach people that have no access to that type of education. Right. So it wasn't like anything like a huge gift. It was really just things that were just embedded in me that I learned growing up, just going to Sunday school, going to school, And all this, which, I mean, at the end of the day, aren't those the ones that we use? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think sometimes people look for these huge moments of like, oh my goodness, I am a prophet to the nations. Or I have $1 billion that I'm now going to solve the water crisis. Where sometimes it's like God has to take us to a remote village in Fiji where it's like you grew up speaking English and you know stories that they can't read. Right. So do something with it. I mean, I grew up just in a middle-class family, but I realized how privileged I was growing up, raised in America. And oftentimes we feel so entitled to things that, I mean, most of the world don't even have access to. Yeah. So you started to see those things as something to share. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that's your journey. Yeah. It was very simple. It reminds me of that story in Exodus where it says like God led the Israelites like little by little.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was like, so there's these little moments. There wasn't like this huge overwhelming like thing that God put on you at 22. You're just like, oh my goodness. Like, okay, like I've listened to culture in some ways that doesn't suit me and isn't what I'm made for. And now I found out that I have all of these things in me that can actually like impact the world and I can have a life of purpose.
Yeah.
And so there you are in your Fijian village.
Yes.
And Garth, you at that point are where? Are you in Kona? Let's go to your first trip to Cambodia.
I'm in Kona at that point.
And do you know each other? You don't know each other.
I mean, we know of each other, but Kona is such a large campus. You're not buddies with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do your DTS.
Yeah.
In Kona.
Yeah.
Who's your leader?
Barney.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
He's from India, so we went to India.
Yeah, okay.
And then we got evacuated because there was almost a nuclear war.
Oh, that was.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was like 2002.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So I
that's
can
a whole story in of itself.
It is. Where'd you go? Thailand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody went to Thailand from India on that trip. Yeah. Okay. So you weren't in Cambodia at that point.
No.
Okay. So you came from a pretty intense
pretty intense background.
You came like a pagan.
I
mean,
mean,
you came pretty pagan.
Yeah. Like Caroline said, she was like the good girl. And she always says there's this song like, why do good girls always love bad boys? You know, like that's I was the bad boy, you know? But
so why did you go to Kona? Was it?
So I had a gap. No, I had a gap year between. I just graduated from university.
Okay.
And then I was going to go, as you mentioned, supposed to go back to law school.
Yep.
So I was accepted for that, but had a year in between and thought, definitely not interested in missions or ministry, but like, I'm believing in Jesus. I want to follow Jesus more. I want to know more about God. And hey, it'd be fun to see the world a little bit. So like this YWAM thing sounds good for 6 months and then I'll do my thing.
How hilarious that we literally all started like that.
Right? That's just how it is, right?
That's how God is.
Yeah.
There's no other way. If he told us.
No doubt. We always talk about that.
Forget that.
Yeah, we'd be like a Jonah and go the other direction.
Put me in the way.
Yes.
We talk about that all the time. Yeah. If God called us to do what we're doing 14 years deep into Cambodia, right? And he was like, you're going to go to Cambodia. You're going to get married there. You're going to have kids there.
Yep.
You're going to have this ministry that explodes and trust me for millions of dollars to build this campus. Yep. If God told me that when I was in my DTS right at the beginning.
How old were you? 23?
24. 23 in DTS. 23. I couldn't handle it, right? No. And that's so often how it is, right?
Always.
We love to talk about the bigness of the call of God, but actually the call of God is so big, we probably can't handle how big it is.
Right.
And so step by step, piece by piece, listening, obeying, and he can give us more of what it looks like.
So you just have a little desire to just, I'd like to travel and Hawaii sounds fun. And you're kind of getting back on track with God.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that's why you went into Hawaii. Yeah. Which is hilarious that once you find out, everybody, what these two are doing, because it would seem so small. Like then, like it was just it probably felt like a flippant choice.
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh, like it just
I'm probably not going to have any other time to do this type of thing in my life, like travel the world. And we were just joking. Yeah. See the world. So like, let's do this now while we're young because we have to like
plan.
Yeah. Go home and do everything.
Yeah. You got to be a lawyer and you got to have kids. You got to buy your house and you got to get your
security.
Cars, and you got to get the 1040 or whatever it is, the 101K. I don't know. 1040.
1040 window?
401K.
1040 window. 1040 window. 401K.
401K is what you're talking about.
We're 1040.
Yes.
We used to be focused on the 401K and now we're focused on the 1040 window. Okay.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Okay.
If you don't know what the 1040 window is, Google it.
Google the 1040
because
window.
The 1040 window should be more important. Why don't you just say more important than your 401K.
Oh, go ahead.
Come on now.
Go ahead and tell people what the 1040 window is. 1040
window is the parallels between the 10th and the 40th latitude lines that stretches through northern Africa all the way through Asia. It has 90% of the least, the last, the lost, 80% of the poorest people in the world. It is the place where the gospel needs to be spread the most, but only 2% of missionaries go there. And only, I think, 2% of missions funding goes there.
Really? I didn't know those last two stats.
It might be up to 3%, but it's pretty
low.
pathetic.
Yeah.
So,
oh my goodness.
and 2/3 of the world lives there, and all the other
2/3 of the world.
Yeah. Think about this, Jamie. I just read this book. You'll love this because you love Asia, right? Yeah. Just read this book called The Future is Asian.
Yeah.
And the book starts off with this: 5 out of 7 billion people on the planet are Asian.
You're kidding.
No, serious. Now listen. And then it goes.
Are they?
So this is including everybody in Asia as well as Asian Americans, Asian Australians.
Diaspora.
So diaspora. So 5 out of 7 billion people on the face of the planet are Asian. And then it says, in the 19th century, the world was Europeanized. In the 20th century, the world was Americanized. And in the 21st century, the world will be irreversibly Asianized. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So is Cambodia in the 1040?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. That's why it's home for us.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We need a hashtag 401k, like thumbs down.
401k or 401k or 1040.
1040. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to get into that more later, but let's go back to your story, Garth. Okay, so you're just a kid who's looking to travel and get a little closer to Jesus, and you land yourself in Cambodia at some point.
Yeah. So 2003, I go for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me about, because when I met you, you were full on, I will live and die in Cambodia. That's where you were. I don't know if you said it and weren't sure inside, because sometimes we say things in faith. But the impression was you were ready to give your life to Cambodia. And that was 16 years ago. And that would have been probably a couple years after you went to Cambodia. So what's the deal with Cambodia and you?
Jesus.
Unpack that. Can you unpack that a little?
As Pastor Dustin said, Jesus is always a good answer yesterday, right? So Jesus.
Okay, so you go.
So I go for the first time in 2003, and
what happens?
Oh, just seeing the situation that Cambodia is in after coming out of a war.
Wait, so talk about that situation a little for people who don't know.
Okay. So 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge commits a mass genocide, 2 to 3 million people. Unlike most genocides are against another people group. So the Nazis against the Jewish people, or tribes against tribes. This is Cambodians killing other Cambodians, trying to, in the name of communism, basically trying to go to an agrarian society where everyone's equal, which that never happens because everyone's never equal because somebody's always on top, right?
Yep.
So, but before that, the late 60s, the Vietnam War is overflowing into Cambodia. So people are already dying. The nation's being war-torn because of the effects of the Vietnam War. 1970, the military leader overthrows the king, and then the Khmer Rouge happens. And then after that, there's political drama and basically 3 armies fighting against each other. Khmer Rouge and 2 other political leaders all the way to the early 2000s. So summarize that, 3 decades of a war-torn nation.
And full-on genocide.
Genocide.
Killing millions?
Yeah.
Millions.
Estimated 2 to 3 million.
And who did they kill? Who were they after? Yeah,
anybody who was educated, anybody formerly in the government, anybody that was a teacher, anybody that had eyeglasses, doctors, so basically they cut off the legs of their whole society being raised up.
In hopes of reforming it?
Yeah, they called it going back to year 0. Gotcha. So reforming it,
Okay.
So interesting fact that I didn't learn until living in Cambodia for a while. You look at the landscape of Asia right now, and nations like Singapore just a couple of years ago became the most expensive place to live in the world. And South Korea, those 2 nations are like the
tigers.
Yeah, the tigers of Asia, like they're epitome of success in Asia over the last 50 years. Well, in the 1950s, they both sent delegations to Cambodia to learn from Cambodia, because Cambodia was kind of considered the Pearl or the Paris of Asia in 1950. And now it's like impossible to kind of even fathom that was impossible. Yeah, because literally they flipped. Like Singapore and South Korea are more like the pearls of Asia.
Right.
And because of the genocide, Cambodia was
But 3 decades before, they were looking at Cambodia as a leader.
As a model.
As a model.
Yeah. So the implications of that on society, right? All of a sudden, before, Cambodians were very proud of their history.
Sure.
Like you can go back to the Angkor Wat era and they were a
Yep.
huge empire and all this stuff. But now, because that completely gets flipped, now like the whole generation has seen themselves as more of like the lowest in Asia.
Wow.
Which creates a huge identity crisis. And, yeah.
Mentalities. That, yeah. Okay.
So seeing
you
that,
see that.
see
you
that.
hear the stories. You see it. You're in Cambodia.
Yeah.
You're a kid.
Yeah.
I just like to
Yeah, he
reemphasize
loved
how
to reemphasize.
normal we all were and how much of kids we were.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have a bunch of money.
No.
We didn't have a bunch of vision.
Yeah.
We were still like figuring out how to be human,
Yeah.
Christian humans.
Yes.
Followers of Jesus.
Following Jesus and making right choices while we're
Uh-huh.
trying. I mean, we're kids.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And this is happening in Caroline
Yeah.
and Fiji. I know you're in Cambodia, a kid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're hearing this and what can you put to words what happened?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like God just kind of invited me into his dreams for Cambodia.
Okay.
There's a real key scripture that God spoke to me out of Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. So it's a story of Joseph and his brothers, you know.
Yeah.
The brothers sell him out and then like he ends up saving them
Yeah.
from famine. And they're like, just hook us up with some food.
Yeah.
And he's basically like, what the enemy meant for evil,
Yeah,
now I'm going to turn
turn to
for
good.
good. And just really felt like God was saying what the enemy meant for evil, because it doesn't get more destructive, demonic than killing your own people, right?
Right.
They estimate 40% of Cambodians were killed during that 3.5 year period.
40%.
40%, right? And we talked about the statistics yesterday.
Yep.
The result of that on the backside is 80% of Cambodians were under 30 years old, 42% under 15 years old. And so it just felt like God was saying, what the enemy meant for evil, now I want to turn to good.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a part of it?
It was that simple.
I think
At
so.
its
You know?
origin.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
were you in the land at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you just feel like God's like, oh my goodness, like here's what I want to do.
Yeah. And you know, that's the point where it's easy to go, yes, that's awesome. And I will go home and intercede for it.
Right.
Right? Like those are the little choices where it's just like,
right. I'm going to sponsor.
Yeah,
or
I'll
I'm gonna
sponsor a
no,
kid.
I mean, we sponsor.
yeah,
Love
it's
it.
awesome. And it's not a
But
bad thing.
At
But
what point do we have to be willing to hear beyond that too?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
for sure.
So why do you think you were
here's
able
here's
to?
another.
Why do you think you didn't go home and intercede?
I did go home and intercede, Jamie. What are you talking
I
about?
did see you back on the American soil. But you always like Cambodia was always there, like burning in you.
I mean, I just felt like I think that process for probably all of us in that season of doing DTS and then staffing in Kona for a couple years was a real. I describe it as a real time of kind of God stripping away all of my own plans.
Yeah.
And then really being at a place where it's like, okay, God, I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything. 'Cause that's how I see what the gospel is.
Yeah.
Like, it's not so often I feel like the church is communicating like Jesus died on the cross to be your assistant to make you awesome.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And it's like,
And it'd be
that's
so fun and great.
yeah. And he wants to make you famous on Instagram.
Yeah.
Insta famous.
Yeah.
And it's like,
influencer for Jesus.
Yeah. And
No offense to influencers.
no, that's God wants to use
Shout out your Ryan.
influencers
Boy pet.
for sure. But like, that's just not in the gospel.
It's not. in the
It's not.
gospel.
And so
So
the invitation
how would you break down the gospel?
the invitation to follow Jesus is an invitation to slowly die to self, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a Bonhoeffer quote, you
Yeah.
know, like, and so I'm like, okay, I'm all in. So
how
whatever,
did you, for real though, Garth. Okay, this is amazing because I know you now and I know you've proven to be this person, but you're 24. A lot of 24-year-olds say I'm all in.
yeah.
What made the difference for you? You know what I mean? Like so many people go to Thailand or Fiji or Cambodia or Africa or, you know, all in this like, oh my goodness, my life is forever changed. I'm going to start this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to die a martyr. I'm going to start, you know, like so many good intentions. Truly like it was hearing and feeling the heart of God for places, but it just never pans out. Why did it pan out for you? Like, what do you think what were the components? Because I've heard this 1,000 times But you actually did it.
Yeah.
I'm sure Caroline is a huge component.
Yeah, I mean,
but like pre-marriage, a support system, all of it. Like, what made it last?
Yeah.
What made it last? Where you went somewhere and you were like, God is inviting me into something He's doing. I'm saying yes. How'd you keep saying yes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I remember meeting you and you're gonna die in Cambodia.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if
You
I don't know.
so said that.
I don't know about that. But I mean, I can remember literally moving to Cambodia, which was so I'd gone there on a number of trips, but then September 2005. So we just celebrated 14 years. Yeah. And going there and going, okay, I really believe this is what God's calling me to do. I'm going to try to obey. And literally, Jamie, I thought in my mind, and if it blows up, awesome. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, at least after a couple of years, I can walk away and go, I tried to obey.
Okay.
And I think it was that simple. I think it was that simple of just like, I really just want to obey because I just believe that that's what Jesus is looking for. It's just simple obedience. Yep. And simple obedience changes history, right?
Yeah.
And
obedience to you looked like going back.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the statistics are ridiculous. You know, we just talked about the 1040 window. The lack of missionaries in the world is incredible. So I think right now there's about 2 billion Christians on the face of the planet when there's about 400,000 missionaries. That is 0.00001% of Christians actually go into cross-cultural long-term missions. Like, let's not even talk about tithing. Like, what if we just sent 1% of Christians to missions? Right. And so there's just a huge need.
Wow.
And there's so many excuses that we can all make.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. And they're good ones.
Yeah. So the needs are huge.
Yeah. So you just were like, okay, if it blows up and it works, great. If it doesn't, I did what I thought was right.
Yeah.
That's like really freeing, I think, for people. That would be really freeing for people because we put so much on ourselves. Like, God gave me this vision to be, to like feed, like to eradicate homelessness in Dallas. There's like some big thing, or like a 1040 window or a nation, one. And it's like, at the end of the day, God, if it works, thank you. If it doesn't, I did what I thought you wanted me to do. Do you think God, like, I don't know how to ask this. Like, was there, like, how much of your yes played a part in it? You know what I mean? Like, and do you know what I'm asking? Like, how much was you having to make hard choices and obey? And how much was God just being like, all I need really is just like a 24-year-old who says yes and goes back?
Yeah. I think a couple of things that come to mind. One was I can remember before going, sitting in Lauren and Darlene Cunningham's house.
Who were the founders of Youth with a Mission.
Yeah. Yep. And Lauren saying something to the effect of, the greater level of commitment someone has to a nation, the greater release of authority and anointing God will give to that person. Oh, wow. And I thought, well, that's a good word, right? That's
really good.
Yeah, but as young people, we hate commitment, right?
Hate it.
Right?
Yes.
But like, again, let's get back to the gospel. Right? Yep. Like the gospel's about commitment. Jesus' commitment to us and him inviting us to be committed to him, So I think that plays a part in it, just being willing, just willingness. God's looking for people, not with a bunch of ability, but with availability. And just willingness to say yes. So I think that plays into it. And then I think it wasn't easy. Like, it was super hard, right? So I move out of Kona where I'm getting raised up in a huge community. And
you have mentors, friends.
And getting raised up as a young leader and being on stages with hundreds, if not thousands of people. And that feels awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a concern for me because that has become like the idea of what it looks like to be a Christian leader is big stages. And not that they're bad, they're good.
Right.
But that's not the goal. The goal is obedience.
Yeah.
And so then I moved to Cambodia and we have a team of 5. And I'm like, no, I'm not joking, Jamie. I'm like,
yeah, I remember
running,
this team
running in the morning, running every morning, like praying and just like in the flesh, like going.
I could be in.
I could be in Kona.
Real talk.
Yeah, real talk.
I could be taking over.
Kona
I could be taking over
and leading stuff and feeling awesome about myself. And here I am with like leading 4 people, and it's not very glorious or cool, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So back to like. I think the reality is just like simple listening and obeying and then just not giving up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of your guys' journey here at 11:20, 11:32.
We're going to change it to 10:40. Church 10:40.
But just like that,
you don't give
listening and obeying and not giving up. And I think that's the major crux of your question about young people and how, not even just young people, people seeing God bring to fruition a dream, a calling. If it's from God, it will require those 3 simple things: listening, obeying, and not giving up. But usually we give up.
Yeah. Do you think that's where it gets most of us?
I do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about, and we'll backtrack because I want to like join your guys' journeys because I want to hear that because I think people will like that. But since we're on this vein, giving up, like, talk about sometimes you wanted to give up.
Somebody asked me 2 years ago, do you ever feel like giving up? And this is like, we're 12 years in at that point, and like ministry's booming and we're big and like, it's like the proof's in the pudding. You kind of feel like, okay, we made it. We made it.
It's working.
But I said, about every week. Like, because it's real. It's real. You feel like giving up. Like there's so many challenges in ministry and cross-cultural ministry. Like, and we live in a world where we're like blending, like really trying to champion Cambodians, but then like we have an international community. It's like, there's so many tensions and you feel like giving up constantly. And I think for me, I just think we live in such an amazing generation, but because we have so many options, it's so easy to opt out when it gets hard. And we're raised oftentimes with really loving parents that actually never allow us to go through a season of persevering. We're always saved from the persevering. And so we never learn how to not give up. We just, we get saved and we get transitioned into this other situation. And I mean, you look biblically. And like, it's like this constant journey of not giving up and perseverance. And I think, sorry, I feel like I'm about to preach up in here.
Please do.
But like, I'm like, when I look at people that actually don't make a dent, but actually make a difference for the gospel, they simply just don't give up. Right. And it's
at the end of the day, it's not hours of prayer. You wouldn't say.
I mean, I think hours of prayer are really, really good.
Prayer, but it's not like a support system. It's not like it's not the perfect staff. It's not all the it's not every piece coming together. It's like a grit.
Yeah, I think there's a grit to it. I mean, I think
grit.
I think you have to have those factors though, right? You need a support system. You will never have the perfect staff because the bigger your staff gets. I mean, we've gone from 5 staff to 130 full-time staff. And you think, as we have more staff, it will get.
What percentage are Cambodians?
About 65%.
65%. So just that alone, the cross-culture thing would be a huge mountain to climb.
Yes, it's a challenge. But you think like if we have more staff, it'll get easier. Well, it gets more difficult because you have more sinners.
And they're all humans. We're all humans. There's just more humans to deal with.
No.
But here's like for me, what I see is if you don't want to just make a dent, but you want to make a difference, like what I see biblically as well as very practically is one thing that God's called you to. One thing alone. Jesus, salvation of the world. That's an easy one. But like Paul's all over the place. But it's one thing. It's one thing. Gospel to the Gentiles, right? Gospel to the Gentiles, right? And then you look at other people, whether it be different leaders. I'll use from our story of YWAM, Lauren Cunningham. Change the history of missions. One thing. Young people from the nations to the nations has completely changed the face of missions. Of course, there were other dynamics, but in 1960, nobody believed in young people in missions.
Yeah. Now it's hyped.
Oh,
now it's amazing.
You can't
but
find
back then.
You can't find a church that doesn't send young people into missions. But back then, it wasn't allowed. So, like, I think the magazine's called Charisma. It's Charisma, right? So they did in 2010, they did a 50th anniversary thing on YWAM because we turned 50, and they called Loren Cunningham the deregulator of missions. Because basically they're saying he changed the face of missions. Not just young people, but then like the 2/3 world of like young people from indigenous nations. And women all being celebrated as missionaries. Like that was not.
He championed women before it was cool to champion.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Why not women?
Yeah.
So Loren Cunningham, one thing alone. And then you look just practically, not even Christian, right? Somebody like Steve Jobs.
Right.
One thing, technology in everybody's hands. Changed the world.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I mean, it's not really hit because everyone wants to jump from one thing to another. But like for me, if you're going to make a difference, you got to know that one thing. Listen, obey, don't give up.
Yeah. It's that long road of obedience in the same direction.
Yes. Oh, Eugene.
Come on.
Nietzsche and Eugene.
Come on.
Eugene's good.
Long obedience in the same direction, the one direction. Okay. Question. For somebody who doesn't know, first of all, what's your one thing? Well, how would do you have one thing?
I think our one thing would be not just Cambodia. Like we're believing like God wants to transform Cambodia in this generation, but we're also believing the next big missions movement, wave of missions is coming out of Asia.
Okay.
Yeah. That's our one thing. So it's bigger than Cambodia.
Yeah. Asia being the hub.
Yeah.
Really for the next.
The force of missionaries.
The force of missionaries. Okay. That's amazing. So for somebody who doesn't have one thing and they're just like working or they're going to college or they're married with a mortgage, 5 kids, and they love missions and how do you break that down to somebody who maybe isn't leading an organization or leading a movement? Would you say like find somebody who has a one thing that resonates with you and serve the vision? Would you say pray about like a personal, you know what I mean? Like how do you break that down for just like a person in life?
Yeah. I think this is going to sound really cliche, but the one thing has to be Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing of being centered on. And then in that, God stirs our hearts for specific things to be invested in.
Yeah.
And so I'd say for the person who's a mom, like with 5 kids, or the dad that's just like, pounding it out every day to make sure, and he's faithful and coming to church and serve and loves God.
Yes.
Yeah. Then I would say the one thing is Jesus, like for all of us. But yes, find things that resonate with your heart and invest in them, however that looks, prayerfully going and serving.
And then it comes back to your guys' listen, obey, and
don't give in.
Yeah, don't give up. Okay, so you felt Cambodia, and then did you ever veer? Did you ever like look back? Or was it pretty gung-ho from the point you really...
I mean, for sure, there was times, like I said, that I felt like giving up.
Like quitting. But you were pretty on track. Yep. Okay, so
But it was getting hard as I was getting older and more single.
And you're single. That's what I can
tell. That's where you want to go.
Going. You know I know
Jamie Klein Bates wants a good love story. Come on now.
So you're in
I know where you want to go.
You're leading. You're alone.
Yeah. So I'm living in a bunk, like a room. Yeah,
describe it. Okay.
With 5 bunk beds, 10 beds. I'm like 29. I'm living with 9 Cambodians. And they're like, bro, you need to get your own room, your own bed, and your own wife. You know what I'm talking about?
They were like feeling for you.
Yeah. Because 29 is really old. Like
29.
To be a bachelor at 29 in Cambodian culture, it's you are pushing it, bro.
Oh, okay. So they were like looking at you like, it may be past your time.
Yeah. The clock is ticking.
And so, okay, let's real talk this. You have a dream.
Yeah.
You are saying yes to God. It had to have popped in your mind. There's nobody for me.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I literally thought, I think it's going to take a bigger miracle for me to get married than like the Red Sea splitting, right?
All of Cambodia to be saved.
Yeah. So our good friend Brandon Fox, right? So Brandon and I, for everybody that doesn't know him, YWAM missionary in Thailand for about the same time.
And Thailand and Cambodia are next to each other.
Yeah.
So it's easy to have relationships. And that's where Garth and I's friendship really happened because I was in Thailand, you were in Cambodia, but it was easy to cross paths. And we mingled teams and got in a rollover car accident together.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No, I've heard
Rollover
of
in
it.
the rain. Remember that?
Yeah.
We were in the back of a
miracle.
Samtao in Thailand with
a Norwegian team.
Yes.
No, Swedish.
Sweden. Okay, I thought it was Norwegian too. And roll over in the rain, roll over, and we were not strapped in, nothing, 3 times. But anyways, so all that to say.
Well, you walk away from that and go, man, we should have been dead. And God has way more to do. And who would have thought that you'd be in Texas?
I know.
That's wild.
How crazy. God, it's the little by little though. It's so, it never comes to be how we think it's going to come to be. Okay, so anyways, you're 29, you're in Cambodia. You're talking about Brandon in Thailand.
I was just saying, because
you're both
Brandon,
about this, right?
we all grew up together kind of in YWAM. And so Brandon's in Thailand, I'm in Thailand. We've both been there for like 4 or 5 years. And we start feeling bad for ourselves. Don't go to self-pity. Self-pity will kill the call of God on your life.
Okay.
But
say that one more time for the people.
Self-pity will kill the call of God on your life. Because you start to feel bad for yourself and then you start to blame God, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, you do.
So stay away from that. But Brandon and I would joke, we're like, man, if we're 35, let's go to like the Blue Mosque and just preach the gospel and we'll just die martyrs, Like that's how we felt. You'd rather die martyr? Stay single. I don't know. It's just how you said real talk.
I love it. I love it. You got to say what people are really thinking. And that's what you'd be thinking. You're like dying to have.
Right?
I mean, it's lonely enough just to be a human in today's world. To be a missionary in another, you're still learning. And it wasn't home then.
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine it was home then. Now it is. Now it's everything you know. But at that point, you still had to have felt a little like fish out of water, like still learning the culture, still making friends, still building a team, still all of it. And you're alone.
Yeah.
Like you're full on alone.
Yeah. So after my discipleship training school, I went to university for a semester. And then I felt the Lord leading me to go back to Kona, to YWAM Kona, and do a school of biblical studies. And in that time, it became very apparent that YWAM would be my tribe. It would be the avenue in which God would lead me into being, in missions. And I knew at that point that it would be overseas in a developing country.
Okay.
I just didn't know when and where. And then after my SBS, I went and I staffed a DTS. And we led.
She's being modest. She helped pioneer.
Thank you.
She helped pioneer a new location for YWAM in Arkansas, and she helped start the DTS.
Right.
And
I remember this now. Yes.
And then she came to Cambodia with the outreach team.
So you led the team.
Yes.
Wait, did you lead to Battambang?
Yeah, you were actually there at that time. Remember in 06? Yeah,
but I think you were in Phnom Penh.
Yeah, after our teams.
Yeah, I never saw you.
We never saw each other in Cambodia.
But I knew that you guys. I think you guys were maybe teaching in a DTS together in Phnom Penh or something.
I think you
that.
had left from the Thailand outreach.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Wow. Okay. So you lead a team to Garth.
Right. And man, it was again the Lord speaking to me in such a simple way, in a way in which I could just say yes.
Yeah.
Because it was that step by step of obedience. And I remember seeing all the needs in my face day in and day out in Cambodia at the time with the different projects and the activities we were doing with this outreach team. And I just remember God just one morning just asked me, "Hey, Caroline, do you breathe?" I said, "Yeah, of course I breathe, God. I'm alive and well." And he said, "Well, then you can serve." Oh. And it wasn't like I felt this huge burden or need to this particular, woman at risk project or the need to be a teacher in discipleship training school to the Cambodians. But it was simply God asking me, like, are you willing to just serve my people, to just love the Khmer people? Yep. And I said, yeah, I can totally do that. And I'll never forget, I was getting after 2 months in Battambang, I remember getting on a plane in Bangkok back to the States. And I said, Lord, I would love to call this place home one day.
Stop.
And it was in that moment that God had embedded in my heart that this would be home for me one day. I didn't know when, but it would happen. And so I actually left YWAM for 2 years after that. Like I didn't have anything,
right?
Nothing,
Yeah,
nothing bad.
Life took you.
It was, I felt like that was the path God was leading me on. So I was out of YWAM for 2 years, back in California, going to school, working a job.
Yeah.
But
you had to go back and take care of your grandma.
Yeah, she was quite ill at the time.
Okay.
And
looking back, was those 2 years like crucial in the?
Absolutely. It was in that time where God was testing me in what he asked me to do, but yet being honoring of my family, of continuing to share with them this dream I had to move to Cambodia, and yet being in a place where I can really cultivate that trust and relationship with my family, knowing that I'd be living overseas for a good chunk of my life or forever.
So those 2 years, because for so many people that would have been like, oh, never mind. It was, I got it wrong. Right. Or, oh, I guess I just was meant to do this all along. And Cambodia was just a feeling.
Yes.
A feeling. But you took it with you.
Yeah.
And you saw those 2 years instead of seeing them as like, oh, like wasted years.
No, absolutely not.
It's like it's the creepy verse. I think it's in Ecclesiastes. I don't know, where it says like, until the word of the Lord came to pass, it tested him. And it's like that, like, oh my goodness, you had this word, you had this thing of like, I think Cambodia is home.
Yeah.
But then there were 2 years of being in America.
Right. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there are times of doubt. There are times of
So how did you walk through that?
Yeah, I would say,
I feel like everybody in the world who follows God has had these moments.
Right.
Where you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I thought this and here I am.
Yeah. I think for me, it was that consistency of continuing to intercede for Cambodia, for God to open up my heart and expand it to a greater capacity for that place, even though I wasn't living there day to day. Yeah. I think another part of it is just that relentless pursuit of saying, God, I know you spoke this to me in such a clear way.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give up on those dreams. I don't want to say no, like to the pressures of living back in America, of the status quo, like you were saying, but just saying, yes, God, like I know that's where it will be home one day.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of that, I had my own idea of what it would look like to move back to Cambodia, and it wasn't God's intention. Like it was, like I honestly
you had Cambodia from God, but we all put our own pictures around it. So and what was the picture you saw?
I thought I'd be moving out there single. Right. I thought I'd be because just in the culture, Southern California where I grew up, it was very motivated by setting up your career before you get married. So I thought if and when I got married after moving to Cambodia, it would be my 30s that I would get married, maybe. If I met the right person. So all that to say, I thought, okay, I'd be moving out to Cambodia single, free from any kind of commitment in that sense, a relational commitment, and that I could really focus in giving myself to Jesus and the Khmer. So
people.
I think what you were asking about, how do you deal with the 2 years where nothing is happening? And you just mentioned it like very practically and theologically is when we hear from God, it's so easy to expect that it's going to happen like this. And so often we get the timing wrong. And so there's the timing issue. And then what you just mentioned, like, what does it actually look like? We oftentimes hear something from God and it's often it's not super specific, right? It's like a general thing. And then we kind of start to make it specific in our minds. And then we create a time frame that God should make it happen on. And oftentimes that's completely different than what God has. And so I think very practically to answer your question as far as like those 2 years, as God speaks to us and we have dreams embedded in our hearts, we have to be really, really careful not to put a time frame on God and not put what we think, what God said into our little box, but really to hold that open-handed before the Lord. Because I from 17 years of trying to listen to God and obey, it almost never looks like you thought it would, and it almost never happens in the time frame that you want it to. And that's back to like obedience and He's not our personal assistant and following.
Yes, that's so good. So those 2 years are over. And do you just feel like a release, or was it like was it people around you, your family that like kind of championed you back out, or what happened?
In those 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So
somebody slides into the DMs. Do you know what that means?
The DMs?
Do you know what it means to slide into the DMs?
No, please.
They've been in Cambodia for 13 years. Let me tell you about the American.
Sliding into the DMs.
The youth lingo. It's like when somebody starts to like make a play for somebody, because you can on Instagram, it's called DMing.
Okay.
And so it's like,
what is DMing?
DMing is direct messaging. So it's not public.
Okay.
So when somebody's feeling somebody, I'm trying to think of what it would be equivalent to in YWAM. Like,
yeah, don't worry. I get it.
Sliding into the DMs. Okay. Like, so you started sliding into Caroline's DMs during those 2 years?
So 2 years I was back in California, and each December of those 2 years, I would go visit my friends that were still on staff in YWAM Kona.
Okay.
And each week I went, I went 1 year in December. Garth would be there, and he was there teaching DTSs. He was still living.
She was there visiting her friends.
I had no idea.
The same exact week.
No, yeah,
yeah. Keep telling yourself that. Jesus loves you so much.
I know he does.
For real.
But I was teaching.
The schedule was not your choice.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm sure not. That's why I'm saying Jesus loves you.
Oh my goodness.
So what were you teaching on? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Okay.
You're
there teaching.
I'm shocked.
And you're there, right? Because you know him from your outreach.
Yeah.
Years before, right?
So and we kept in contact a little bit, very loosely. Yeah. Like she'd get updates and she'd email like, "How's it going in Cambodia?"
Yeah.
And she had showed interest in like coming back. Yeah. And so I was like,
I wanted to keep a pulse on what was going on.
Well, and I thought she'd be a great staff.
Yeah.
Obviously. And
a little more.
Maybe a little bit more. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So anyways, of course. So when I saw him that first December in Kona,
I love this so much.
I was like, "Whoa, Garth, what are you doing here?" And I'd ask him, how everything is going with the ministry, how so-and-so is doing, the different friends I had made in the past. And then the second December that we ran into each other in Kona, again, I was asking him how things were. And then that's when the friendship turned into a little something more than a friendship, where he expressed his interest in me. And
you're welcome.
Yeah. You know what was interesting though, Jamie? The week before that second December, I prayed to God. The week before,
check this is good.
The week before I flew out to Kona, I was, just having some time with the Lord. I was praying. I said, "Lord, I know that you had put this place, Cambodia, in my heart to go and live there and call it home one day. And here I am back in California, thousands of miles away, and I'm living this life that is very routine, redundant. I don't see Cambodia on the horizon, but I know it's there. I just don't see it coming anytime soon. Yeah. Can you just throw me a curveball, God?"
No, stop. You just asked. You made an ask.
I asked God, "Can you throw me a curveball?" I don't know why I used that verbiage, but I said, "Can you throw me a curveball?" And that next week I was in Kona, and I ran into Garth. And there's no coincidences in the kingdom of God, right? So here we are both in Kona. I'm still living in California. He's living in Battambang, Cambodia.
You happen to be in Kona.
Yeah.
2 years in a row, same time. And I'm getting older and more lonely. And I'm thinking, man, I got to pull the trigger up on this. Let's, you know what I mean?
There's a line. There's a line.
So
you need to make a grand gesture.
So long story short, he was that curveball. Because like I said before, I thought I was moving out to Cambodia single. I'm ready to just hit the ground run. And here he was.
Well, she kind of watched the curveball for a while. She didn't quite knock it out of the park.
Like any smart girl will.
I wasn't ready to throw my sugar around.
Come on.
Caroline's mama didn't raise no fool.
Caroline's mama didn't raise no fool.
I love it. Okay, so at that point, when you went to Cambodia, you were in a relationship. Or there was expressed, however it looks there, or what? Well, there was an expressed.
It was definitely a process. So
yeah.
I don't know if you want to go into all those details.
I guess what I would love to hear about is how did you, Caroline, because you both loved Cambodia, but there were different paths there.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the whole Cambodia thing.
You didn't.
No, I didn't. Like I knew that she was.
No, stop. Are you serious?
Yeah, so I knew that she was.
So for all you know, she could want to be a California girl forever.
Yeah, or Fijian. No, I knew she. I knew that she felt called to missions.
Okay.
And I knew that she enjoyed her
heart.
time in Cambodia, but I didn't know about like getting on the airplane and feeling and saying I could call this place home. I had no idea about that. So then I pursued her, and she played hard to get for a long time.
Good.
And then we finally started dating, and then she came out to Cambodia, and for like a whole summer for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And then during that, she really wanted to see like, can this work in Cambodia, right? And then during that time, I think as she really felt like this is from the Lord, then she finally
disclosed to him that years ago, God.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was huge for me.
You held that tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure that this was, this would be a go.
You don't want to put a loaded gun in his hand saying right?
Yeah.
But it was
if he can't be responsible with it.
It was huge for me because it was very evident that God had clearly called her to Cambodia before this happened, which is so important because you definitely want to be called by God, not by Garth.
You don't go to Cambodia because you're in love with somebody in Cambodia.
Right. Oh, yes. It's not a place you just want to move to.
Well, and that's just like
it'll all work out fine. I'm
part
sure.
of the journey, you know, as you guys are working with so many young people of like making sure that there's similar callings, right? And such a
because I would imagine it's been hard enough with similar callings.
Yeah,
in the sense of growing a ministry in Cambodia together.
Right.
So if one of you had been like, oh no, I don't feel this at all after all.
Yeah.
That would have been really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you guys started dating, Caroline, you're like, did Cambodia just like grow and grow and grow until you're finally like, did you feel like, okay, we're on the same page with this? The ministry, YWAM Cambodia, you have in all of it? Or was it like a slow process of you?
I think honestly, it was, again, back to the simplicity of what God had asked me. It's like, are you willing to serve, Caroline?
Okay, so that's where it was at for you.
Yeah, for me. And I already knew it was confirmed years ago that YWAM would be my avenue, that YWAM would be my tribe. But I honestly, I think honestly people, there's times where, I mean, even for myself, when I was like, okay, so I know that my life is not my own. It's following after Jesus, but like, we expect like God to write something in the clouds and like 10 miracles to happen and like 500 prophetic words from different individuals. And we think it's our right to have it. We feel like we're entitled to it.
We're entitled to it.
It's so simple. If you look at the word of the Lord, if you just look at the Bible, he says go. Yeah. He says go. Like he already said it. So like there's no need to get even more further just words from other people. I think there's an importance of whatever community you're a part of to continue to walk it out with mentors, with leaders and people that can speak into your life that know you in your day to day. But like, honestly, I think we put so much pressure on God, what's this big call in my life? And then you don't actually do anything. You just jump from thing to thing because you're just waiting for that big word in the clouds. And
I love that so much.
Yeah, I don't think that's how God.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't think that's how God really asks us. I think he just simply asks us to just take that first step, that risk.
Yep.
And then the second risk.
And then the next risk.
Yeah.
It's like I heard somebody say one time, your reward for overcoming your last challenge or risk is your next one.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is life with God.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, your reward for like going home for 2 years, your reward for going to Cambodia and then having to continue, all of it is just the next risk that you have to take until it lands you in. And a lot of people, I think, would look at your guys' life now and be like, oh, you've arrived. I'm sure you don't feel, you don't feel like that at all, right? Of course not. Because to you, it's just, you're just in the current risk.
Yeah.
But for so many people on the outside, it's like, oh, like you're living God's dream. He told you Cambodia, 14 years ago, and look at this. But to you, it's not because you're on God's path. You're not looking at it through human eyes being like, oh, well, we built an awesome campus and we're reaching 30,000 Khmer people. We're doing awesome. To you, it's like, oh, is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Just being faithful to the step and the risk.
Right.
Yeah.
So you guys get married. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I could have it all wrong, but you get sick pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
In Cambodia.
Right.
So you're married. You guys are like starting to like build this. Like you have to be so stoked. Like work together.
Yeah.
You've got somebody with you.
Finally.
Like
not
you're like
long.
going to have a family.
Yeah.
Isn't God good?
On the top bunk anymore. Isn't God good? Won't he do it? And then you get really sick.
Yeah.
And you're in the middle of like classes, right? I think I remember you telling me like you were learning the language at the time. So you move.
Yeah, it was within 6 months of moving there that
6 months.
Yeah, that I get really sick. And yeah, it was a very challenging season. I honestly think.
And how long were you sick?
Close to a year. I think it was like 9-10 months. Yeah. And yeah, it was in that moment of uncertainty of how long this will. We didn't really know how long it would last for. Of just continuing to hold on to what God had promised. That I was, in fact, in the center of God's will, that he did, in fact, call me all those years ago to Cambodia. And you just have to have tenacity to hold on to what God has told you all those years ago and just not give up. And that this was just a hurdle in the long run of life, you know? Yes. And so it was a hurdle for us, and it was a longer hurdle than we wanted, of course. But at the end, I did become healthy again. And it challenged my faith, honestly. But it honestly...
In what ways?
Did God really say Cambodia? I mean,
you
will have to have those doubts.
To say anybody who said they didn't would be lying, I would think. You have to be laying there being like, oh my gosh, like I just followed God all the way here and here I am flat on my back.
Right.
That has to be like challenging.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was definitely challenging, but also it kind of amped me up of like, man, the enemy is out. He is.
Oh, okay. So he picked a fight and you were ready to.
Yeah. And I was like, no way, you know? So in a sense, it actually helped me to a greater capacity of spiritual warfare. I'm just saying, it's so thick when you're running after Jesus and trying to obey and take those risks. It becomes even thicker. I don't think it becomes easier. In fact, 10 years, here I am, 10 years in living in Cambodia. I feel like the war over the call of our ministry, over our lives, over our children's lives is even thicker. We just have to be on guard. Yeah. That might sound so cliche, but it really is.
And it needs to be said.
Yeah.
Because so much of like we were talking, the ways the gospel's presented is say yes, and then
it's easy.
It'll be so easy. And it'll be more peaceful, it'll be more joyful, it'll be a lot of things, but easy. So do you, like looking back, we were talking last night at dinner, we were telling you guys the story when we first moved to Texas. And I had gallbladder surgery the first night, our car broke, our AC went out in the middle of July, it's like 104 degrees. And we were laughing because we were like, oh, if only that was as hard as it was ever going to get. So looking back, like a year sick, had to at the time been like, God, like, what is happening? But looking back, are you like, oh, that was nothing?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
If only it was.
Oh, yeah. But definitely, I mean, if there is anything I learned in that season, it was just the capacity to trust in him more, to trust in that he really is good, that he really does have good intentions for our future together.
Yes.
But to trust.
So how
not
did
knowing
you
the
hold
other side
on
of it.
to did you just hold on to the past words? Did you hold on? When you talk about tenacity, practically, how does someone be tenacious? Like, how does somebody hold on for dear life? You know?
Right.
Because some people I feel like are wired to be tenacious. And some people are wired as like, I'm a fighter. Like Dustin's a fighter, I'm a fighter. So it's like things get hard. Like I'm ready to go to bed.
Yeah.
Or bury my head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. You know, I just have that instinct of just, you know. So when you talk about tenacity, I'm like, how does somebody cultivate tenacity over the right things?
Yeah.
Right? Or how did you, was it kind of innate in you? Or did you have to get to a point where you're like, I'm not going down this way? God said too much? Or do you even remember that part?
Honestly, I was sleeping a lot. So
she had mono. So she was literally asleep 17 hours a day. It was wild. But I think I could say this.
Yeah, you probably observed it.
Well, I would say, there were points where I was like, dude, we need to maybe pack it up and go home. This is not working. And we did come back to the States for a season that was part of the journey of getting her better. But to her credit, I never ever heard her doubt or even open that door of maybe we should go back. you know?
I think it was all in my head. I definitely doubted it in my head. Of course you thought
it. This is very good,
but I didn't vocalize it because I didn't want to plant. Yeah. And I didn't want to plant any seed in our relationship, in what God had called us both to separately, but then brought it together when we got married. I didn't want to put anything in Garth's thought life that would make him concerned or like shrink back.
Wow.
Well, because as a husband, I mean, it was hard for me. You know, I wanted to take care of her, you know, and so I think it's that in the season, it's so hard when you look back on it. You know, when I look back on it, the scripture that comes to mind is like in Judges chapter 3, verse 1 and 2, I think it says, and the Lord left some of the giants in the land so that the second generation would learn how to war, right? Like, and I just think that's the reality. God allows us to go through tests to teach us how to war so that we can overcome the giants in our lives. And that was, we look back and go, that happened. And then she got better. And then we came back 3 months later, she got pregnant and she was like, she had hyperemesis.
Oh, so it was like a hard pregnancy too.
Yeah. Oh, she could not keep down water. She had to be on IVs every single day for almost 9 months. She lost 20 pounds and she didn't have 20 pounds to lose. Right.
Wow.
So that's like almost 18 months out of like 21 months. She's sick. And you look back at that and go, that was so hard. Yeah. But there was a serious foundation laying that was going on of like going, we can really trust each other. Yes. This is like the first 2 years of our marriage, right?
So
like,
good, you guys.
Yeah, first 2 years of our marriage, the majority of it, she's sick.
Right.
But like, we're just holding on and we're learning how to trust each other, persevere.
Right. And what I hear, which is so amazing, Caroline, which I oh my goodness, like you honored the call at the end of the day over like even the marriage or what you were feeling or your own doubts. Or at the end of the day, you were like, this is what I'm called to and I will not back down.
Yeah.
And I think when we do things for people, when we go to Cambodia for a person, when we go, you know, into ministry for a person, or when we go to college for a person, or when we do things for other people, will never last.
Yeah.
It'll never work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But there was something so deep in you, which I like, this is what you guys are teaching the interns tomorrow. So you should touch on like owning your own call.
Right.
Like if you're called at the end of the day, it didn't like you weren't going to drag Garth or anybody down with you because you had it. Like you weren't doing it for anybody else. How did you differentiate between loving somebody that's living the call and like really knowing like at the end of the day, no, this isn't about me doing anything other than what God said.
Right. Yeah.
I feel it's really rare.
Honestly, Jamie, I think this might touch on, hopefully it'll answer your question, but what comes to mind when you asked that question was the commitment I had made to myself and to God in my single years.
Yes.
Of understanding who I am, of, like it was like dating myself, or I sometimes call Jesus my boyfriend. Yeah. You know, of like understanding who I am in God, my identity in God before I got to know someone else in dating, which is Garth, you know, and I really understood how God made me. I understood the call he had put in my life. Yep. And because I knew that and was confident in that, I think it really helped bring a level of trusting each other, of honoring each other's differences and similarities when we did get married. And it really helped in my own, like, that I wasn't there for him. Yeah. That
you really weren't.
Yeah. That I was there because God had called me there all those years ago because I just understood who I was. And I'm still, you know, discovering who I am as a 34-year-old. But when things got
hard, you had that.
Yeah.
Because a person will never carry us through.
Yeah, absolutely. But, so, I mean, just as encouragement to all you single people out there, really, those single years were such a gift to myself. And now I see it as it's a gift to those around me because I'm not, you know, anxious. What are they thinking about me? Or there's just this peace in knowing that like I'm how God made me, all the strengths and weaknesses that I have, because I'm fully aware of my weaknesses.
You can own them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not insecure about it. Like, it's just, this is who I am. Right. This is how God created me. And I need you just as much as you need me in the body of Christ. Yeah.
Something I love about Caroline's journey in the call of God is so often we think about like the call of God as this like big, awesome thing. And like she said, like part of her journey has been just like simply saying, I breathe, I can serve. And like Jesus speaking that to her. Because in reality, like on the day to day, she makes so much of the machine of our ministry run, but it's all from behind the scenes. Right. And so critical. But it's so, I feel like sometimes there's a good aspect of our generation really wanting to know the call of God on our life. But sometimes we idolize the call of God and we end up chasing the call of God instead of chasing Jesus.
Come on.
And I think it's very critical for us to help everyone, and especially young people, like with the interns, understand like you end up in the call of God, not by chasing the call of God. You end up in the call of God by chasing Jesus. And as you chase Jesus, one day you wake up and go, this is my calling.
I'm living what I'm supposed to do.
The call of God is not some distant thing that happens when you turn 35 and you're a pastor or you're in this big ministry. The call of God is every day simply saying yes to Jesus. So, and that's just a testimony of her faithfulness and obedience.
Thanks, babe.
It's so good.
Just speaking truth in love. Speaking truth in love, baby.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so like as we close, tell us really quick some of the things happening in Cambodia so people get a picture of what is happening now. And then I want to talk about some of the like the victories and the losses along the way that contributed to the whole picture looking back, you know? So you have, because not everybody was there on Sundays. So we'll hear that you have just go through the whole thing. The youth program and the kids and the soccer
so,
and
I mean,
the building and the DTSs.
It's a big question.
How many like?
So we're about 130 staff full-time in our city. Okay. And if you don't know anything about YWAM, that means that all of them are volunteers. Nobody's paid. So that in itself is quite miraculous. Even our indigenous Cambodian leaders, they raise all of their own support. We do kind of three main different things. One, we're reaching into our communities, targeting a bunch of villages, areas of the city that are really, really impoverished, doing community development, working with women, children at risk, doing church planning. Then we run quite a large community center. So we just moved on almost 3 years ago to a 13-acre campus that we've been building out. So we run a bunch of educational programs, a preschool, a primary school, a youth development center, which has primary English classes and 400 kids coming in every single day to that. We run a bunch of recreational sports activities. So a CrossFit gym. We run a soccer ministry where it's like a big soccer league, 600 kids in the soccer league. So literally we're engaging thousands of people. And then the third part is we're running a bunch of training schools, primarily focused on Cambodians. I think over the last 13 years, we've trained up over 2,000 in long-term ministry and missions. So yeah, that's like a snapshot of what we do. And
it all started 14 years ago?
I moved there 14 years ago.
5 people.
Yeah, 5 people.
5 people.
Yeah.
5.
Yes.
And you, lonely single man.
Yeah.
And 5 people.
Yeah.
And in 14 years, by just saying, what I hear you guys saying is simple yeses.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, would you say?
Oh,
For sure.
Like simple yeses. If God had told you that all that would be coming, we would have
run the other way.
No way, right?
For sure. I mean, as a 26-year-old, and God says, "Hey, I'm gonna."
It's hard enough to leave 5 people.
Yeah. Well, and then God says, "Oh, and because I moved to Cambodia, going, who needs buildings? Like we'll meet under a tree, like super, super simple."
Right.
And then, we're in this journey, and God calls us to trust Him for this massive property, and we've been on this multi-million-dollar faith journey. I don't think I could have handled it, and that's again back to, Lauren Cunningham says, if the call of God on your life doesn't scare you, it's probably not from God. Because if you think you can do it on your own, then He wouldn't call you to do that, because He will always call you to something that's way above and beyond your capacity, right? But I think oftentimes in his loving graciousness, he just calls us step by step, right? So it's that first step of like, just say yes and just go. And I say, if it all blows up in 2 years and it's awesome, we'll keep going. If not, we can just walk away and say we tried to obey. Yeah. And then step by step, and you turn around and go, I would never do anything else. You couldn't pay me to do anything.
The joy that comes with the obedience. Yeah. Like you were saying, steps of obedience, the joy that comes with it. You can't buy that. Honestly, like we live such a rich life. We honestly look at each other and we're like,
oftentimes, like probably at least once a week or once a month.
We're like, what a life.
What a life that we live. You know?
What a life.
For sure.
For real.
For real.
Yeah.
For real. You look at each other and you're like, we are living the dream.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to know how many people can say that.
Yeah.
Right?
But here's the deal.
Like how many people can say that?
Here's the deal though. Obedience.
Like, and it's been so scary.
Yes.
So scary. So traumatic along the way. We don't even have time for the stories of like loss and pain and crushing and all like, but I know it's all there. Yeah. Like there's no way you build something like that without there being so much along the way.
Yeah.
And you look at each other every morning and go like, wow, what a life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
people would pay millions of dollars to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars. Why can you say that?
Again, back to obedience.
Yeah.
We live in a generation that chases happiness.
Okay.
And happiness and joy are different. Okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So happiness is temporary. Uh-huh. Happiness depends on circumstances. Okay. Happiness is fleeting. Mm-hmm. And joy is constant. Joy can be consistent through any circumstances. Yep. And real joy comes from obedience to God. Mm-hmm. And so biblically, we see that there is access to a joy from the Holy Spirit that only comes as we walk in obedience to God. And I think that's what we experience, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not. But he never promised easy. Right.
Yeah. Well, and
you're okay with it.
Yeah.
You've come to terms with that.
Absolutely.
Well, you think about all the good things all the good things in life aren't easy.
Right.
Oh, come on.
Right.
Right? Like marriage, is awesome, but it ain't easy. Mm-hmm. Having kids is awesome, but it ain't easy. Mm-hmm. Following Jesus is awesome, but it ain't easy. Friendship is awesome, but it isn't easy. We idolize easy, but actually easy is not usually that good.
It doesn't land us where we actually need to be and want to be, really.
And we hate difficult, but actually the difficult things are usually the good things. Mm-hmm. And it's usually where we have to trust God.
And if we can be tenacious, which is what you were saying with that. And that's where I think it gets so hard. And then people doubt. And then it's like, okay, so there's so many things I want to ask you guys.
Crushing.
There's so many things, the crushing. But okay, so for somebody who's freaking out about am I obeying or not, right? Like, because YWAM culture is we hear God and we obey. We hear God and we obey. So from day one, we learn to hear God's voice. Like you don't get past 7 days in YWAM without knowing God's voice. But a lot of people it feels and sounds vague and uncertain. And somebody, let's say I was just talking to a girl or a woman a few weeks ago and she was like, really felt like God told me to do this thing, to start this thing. And it didn't work. In the natural. It didn't work. So how do you reconcile, does God compensate with it for a good heart, do you feel like, to obey? How do you filter out your flesh? How do you filter out wanting to be married? How do you filter out wanting to go home or not go? Or what's the filter? How are you so clear on, okay, obey?
Yeah.
For somebody who's like, but I don't know if it's God.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's where the people in America that will be listening to this, that's going to be one of the questions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think number one, we got to be people of the word.
That's great.
Right? So we got to know our word because God will never speak anything that's contrary to his word. So number one, we got to be people of his word. Number two, we have to cultivate a life of learning to listen to God's voice and how that works from the Bible. Seeing God has spoken from Genesis to Revelation. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yep. He hasn't stopped speaking. Like Dustin said yesterday, his dad used to say, it's like an FM radio. You just got to tune it in, right? Yep. So, but that tuning in requires consistently practicing hearing God's voice. And as you practice that, you learn to hear God's voice over time. And then you need people around you that can bring mentorship, accountability, and really confirmation. Is this God or not? Yeah. And then when things turn out like the example that you just said of the woman who said, I thought I heard God, but it didn't turn out like I thought. Then we go back to God and go, okay, what happened there? Did I miss it? Were you trying to teach me something? Did I hear the big picture, but I didn't hear the details? Yeah. And in the journey of that is how we learn to hear God's voice more clearly, you know? So yeah, those are some thoughts on that.
Really good. That's good. Okay, so the hard times.
Yeah. Come on.
the crushings.
Yeah.
The moments of like, oh my goodness, like this is so much harder than I ever thought it would be. Or I always thought I would maybe come up against this, but it actually, was this. What carried you through? Can you give some, just to encourage people, maybe in year 5 of your journey, right? Or year 2, like what carried you through and what are some examples of like some giants faced along the way that at the time felt like Goliath, which probably ended up being a bear or a lion, right? Yeah. But at the time, it feels like you're fighting the whole world or the devil himself. It's like...
Yeah. I mean, I think so many times, like we've already talked about, you feel like giving up. Like I can remember like a specific moment early on. I think we were a year and a half into the ministry and there's a reporter that came around and they're like, we're just reporting about like good things that people are doing in Cambodia. And long story short, I told them no. And then they came back a bunch of times. So I talked to them. For those listening, if you are in Christian ministry, don't give an interview to somebody that you don't know because they can tweak it any way they want and make you look really, really foolish.
Yep.
So nobody had ever told me that. Yep. And so I said to the guy, all right, but if you ever publish anything, let me view it first. Well,
of course not.
Yeah. And it turned out I had no idea, but they were really anti-Christian and they completely slammed us in a magazine, right? So that sent us on this situation where we were freaking out, like, are we going to get kicked out of the country? Cambodia, and essentially, God allowed my reputation in the Christian world in Cambodia amongst missionaries and churches to kind of get crushed a year and a half in. And I mean, it was incredibly scary. Like we went to prayer and fasting and like literally another missionary, meaning well, he came to me, he goes, brother, we're praying for you. And you know what? Even if all the missionaries get kicked out of Cambodia because of this situation, it's okay because the Cambodians, they can do it, which is awesome. It's true. The Cambodians can do it. But like what I just heard you say was what you did could get everybody and like literally millions, probably billions of dollars of investment into the kingdom of God kicked out. And so you're just like, you feel, but in hindsight now looking back, you go, God allows you to have your reputation die so that you no longer live for your reputation, right?
That's so good.
And so the crushing is a part of the journey. And I would say, so many scriptures, it's like, he refines us like gold. Like we all want gold, but nobody wants the refining, right? Yeah, like John 15, like we all want the fruit that remains, right? John 15:60, nobody wants the pruning, or I'm going to cut off every single branch, that doesn't. I'm going to cut off all the branches that don't have any fruit, and all the branches that do have fruit, I'm going to prune. Like nobody wants the refining, nobody wants the pruning.
That's life though with God.
But that's what we should expect.
That's what we should expect.
If we're people of the word. So when it gets hard, we shouldn't go, oh, this isn't God. When it gets hard, we should go, oh, this is God. And God is taking my character and my integrity deeper so that I can bear more fruit, so that I can be gold.
So good. Anything to add, Caroline?
No.
Okay. So anything that just carried you guys through the last 14 years, like as far as just like, are there people, are there voices, are there, do you have friends in Cambodia? Is there like how, like what practically, what helps you stay on mission?
It's great.
Besides just what we've talked about already, like the listening, the obedience, the love for God, commitment to the gospel, practically what keeps you on mission?
Yeah. And we have an amazing community.
In Cambodia?
In Cambodia, yeah. We have an amazing community. And I would say especially our Cambodians. I mean, we have so many Cambodian staff that are just stellar, and they've been with us for 9, 10, 12, 14 years. And I think that's the encouraging thing for us is like investing into leaders. Because for nations to be transformed, it's not going to happen from outsiders, but we can be a platform.
Right.
So I think that's a major factor. I think remaining continue to be learners is really, really critical. Humility. Yeah. And having mentors around us. Yeah.
I say just practically, we Sabbath really hard. We
fight for our Sabbath.
Sabbath. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I know it sounds really simple and
so good.
God commands it in the Bible.
Right?
Yeah, but honestly, we can be bombarded by so much in life that the day of our Sabbath, we leave our to-do list to do, and then we're running frantically from thing to thing to thing that we actually don't take time to rest our minds and our souls and our physical bodies. And we have guarded that for so long.
I'd say long haul though, that the Sabbath, intimacy with Jesus, really prioritizing time with God.
With him,
and then for us, just exercise, staying healthy physically. I think those three things have kept us, 14 years feels long, but actually when you get to 14, you're like, it's not that long. I know a bunch of people that have been around a lot longer, but I think those have been some three keys for us.
This might sound really simple again, but staying positive, life is going to bring you down. Doesn't matter if you're in full-time ministry or you're,
I feel like you have a real authority in this.
Right. You just have to continue to stay positive and continue to trust in the word of God and continue to say yes and not see all the negatives that are going on, not only in your own personal life, but around the world. Because if you do that, man, it's a cycle that will continue to bring you down. And
I can say I'm somebody that's easy to see all the weaknesses, all the faults, all the negatives, quite honestly. But what I've learned is positivity is fertile ground to cultivate faith. And being critical and negative.
Has Caroline taught you this?
No, this is a Darlene Cunningham.
This is Darlene.
This is Darlene. This is Darlene.
This goes back to Mama Dar.
Yeah, Mama Dar. This is Darlene Gold. She would say positivity cultivates a heart of faith, and criticism and negativity cultivates a heart of unbelief. And it's so true.
I've seen it in my
That's
own
creepy
life.
true.
Yeah, and I would say
see it in my life.
Wow. It's so easy, and we have to be honest. It's not that we're not honest, and it's not that we don't deal with the issues. We have to deal with the issues. But I think one of the keys for us has been, okay, we're going to deal with the issues, but we're going to be focused on the wins. Because if I get so focused on all the stuff that needs to be better, I'll be so discouraged. And also, a negative mind is not a creative mind. Right? You meet people in ministry that are so jaded and you have a creative idea and they're going to shoot it down 100 times. This is in ministry and in missions, right? So a negative mind is not a creative mind, but a positive mind. And we're not talking about the power of positivity in the gospel of Oprah.
Faith.
We're talking about people walking by faith and really trusting God, that God can do things crazy above and beyond what we can imagine. So
good, you guys.
Keeping your heart soft. I think that for me is staying unoffended, to continue to hold on tight to that unoffended heart, because it's so easy,
We're such an offendable culture, right? Everybody's offended about everything, right? You look at social media. Social media is basically the highlight reel of why I'm awesome, and then the offense list of why everyone has ticked me off, right? I think that's for us.
I was on Instagram yesterday and some guy was talking about his wife, and he was something about because I guess there are fires in California right now, or maybe it was before. And he said something about she's smoking hot, and people were just belittling him for saying smoking because he's from California and there were forest fires. And it's people are just again, just a list of everybody's looking for something to be. He was just calling his girlfriend or whatever, smoking. And it was how dare you use the term smoking? Because there's literal smoke in California. But whatever it is, it's just, but it's that instinct to be offended and to look for the negative, to think everybody's out to take me down or take my philosophies down or my ideologies down. And keeping a soft heart.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I would
Caroline.
say the last 5
That's
years.
huge.
That's been.
I don't know if there's a bigger thing, maybe practically in ministry than that. Besides the spiritual components, keeping a soft heart
to God and to others.
Oh.
I would say that's been the last 5 years, like the number one
I think
battle
it's-
that God's
I think
been
it's
really
mine too.
pointing out. Like,
Mine too.
keep a soft heart. Because it's so easy
So easy.
after, 10, 15 years in ministry to get jaded, hard-hearted. So,
This is just good for me to hear. It's so good to know, like, it's everywhere.
yeah.
The threat is the threat to hardening your heart is everywhere.
Mm.
Anybody who's taking ground for the kingdom, and we cannot.
Yeah.
We can't let it happen. I always say that, like, I see why people in churches or ministries just become fakers. Just self-preserve.
Yeah.
Because you just get like shot at so many times, you get so many arrows or so many whatever, or you just start to get so negative and so cynical that you just walk through and you're like, you walk through campus and you're like, hi, good to see you. Hi, John Pursuit. And at home, you're just like, and you can see, right though?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can
For
see
sure.
how it happens. And I'm like,
and it happens.
come hell or high water, it cannot happen to me.
Yeah.
It cannot happen to
But
me.
you know that because it's probably happened, right?
100%
Yeah.
has
Absolutely.
happened.
For sure.
That's
it's like,
exactly right.
I mean,
yes.
like a lot of times recently, we've been talking about like the unoffendable heart and like fighting for a soft heart. And the reason like we know is because we've ended up with hard hearts.
That's totally
right. Like it's
yes.
almost impossible not to at some point. But then the reality is, are we going to catch it and fight for it and fight it back to a soft heart or not? So I just say that because we've got to be honest about ourselves and where we're at, because if we're not honest, we'll never grow. Right.
Nope.
So we got to, as we're listening and as we're on the journey, go, okay, I have a bit of a hard heart and like, I need to fight for a soft heart. So
I feel like that's been like my number one journey.
Yeah.
Probably the last few years.
Yeah. That's just definitely ours.
Yeah.
Oh man. You'd think it'd be something so much bigger, right?
Right.
It's always those tricky little like, but if he gets our hearts hard, I mean, you
can't speak into us.
There's nothing left but a faker.
Yeah.
But
again, it's knowing scripture, right? I think in Proverbs 3 or 4, guard your heart because out of your heart, all of life will flow, right? So.
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is so encouraging to me, you guys. Okay. First of all, I want to hear each of your, if you were to say like, I want 2 more things left.
Okay.
Life message, but I want you to say it in Khmer.
Life message.
What would you say at this point in your life would be your life message? If I were to be like, you're going to teach our interns or you're going to preach right now, what would just spring out of you? I want you to say it in Khmer.
And then say it in English?
No, just say it in Khmer and then I'll translate it later.
Okay.
I think for us,
we have to do a little homework to hear the life message.
Okay.
As listeners, yeah.
How are you going to do homework?
Oh, just do
say
it.
Hey, this is the Jamie Klein Bates show. Just do what I say, okay? Just do what I say.
Just give a blurb of what your life message would be, but I want you to say it in Khmer.
Me or her?
You. And then I want to hear Caroline's too. They could be the same, but do you think they're the same?
I would say, our families is pretty, because we believe in families as missions.
Good.
So it's our kids too. It's not just Garth and I are doing ministry. Our kids are in ministry until they turn 18. And then after then they choose what their life path is.
But as of now,
the 4 of us, Lila, Gunnar, Garth, together. And I, we are. Like, as I'm sure you're in the
same thing.
Yeah.
It's the 4 of us. And then you can do whatever you want with your life.
But when they're under our wings.
So good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. That's so good.
So I would say our family.
As a family, but say it in Khmer.
Oh, okay.
Say that in Khmer, family on mission.
No. Like what you would say. I know the answer. I'm just trying to get you to say. like if you were to just be given a microphone and be like, share what comes out of you. If you were to speak to, well, I guess maybe I should be more specific, like to an American audience, like a life message of like something you've learned, or what would you say in like a couple sentences that would just, is so deep in you? Like what would be a one thing, you know?
អត្តន័យដំណឹងល្អជាព្រះយេស៊ូវសក្តិលើឆេះឆ្កាងសម្រាប់យើងហើយយើងព្រះអង្គហៅយើងលែបង់ជីវិតសម្រាប់ដំណឹងល្អ
Really good.
You don't know what I said.
He said, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Say
for a bathroom break?
Yeah. Oh, no, we're almost done.
Okay.
Yeah. I know, I have to go to the bathroom so bad. Just say something to Kamaya really quick
We're
and you're
gonna have
done.
to edit that out.
No, seriously. I've been like, oh
Is
my
there a
God.
bathroom?
Would you add anything to that?
No, I think that's
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Okay,
It
good.
captures like the essence of who we are. As a
Okay.
family.
That's amazing. See, this is cool. It's like a little Easter egg that somebody can find out what you said. Last question. This is it. And you're done. Bathroom break. What would you say to your 21-year-old self?
What would I say to
Yep.
my 21?
What advice would you give your 21-year-old self? If you could go back and be like, hey, Caroline, I want you to know this for, however many years down the road.
Right.
You want to go? You want me to go? My 21-year-old self was a bit of a wreck. But can I just say this? I think this is even going to be better than my advice.
Do it. Go for it.
So probably 5 years ago, we were at a conference with about 400 missionaries from all over Asia. And I had the privilege of hosting a question and answer with Lauren.
Uh-huh.
So Lauren Cunningham, and I saved the last question, who actually, it was from Brandon Fox.
Oh, cool.
And it was, as an 80-year-old Lauren, what would you say to your 30-year-old self?
Mm-hmm.
And Lauren Cunningham, who's, effectively deregulated missions, as we talked about, he leaned back, did the old man, lean back and sigh, and then he leaned forward. Now, this is a guy, if you read his book, who he had the opportunity to take over his aunt's business, and he could have been a millionaire, basically. And I've heard him say, basically, I'm so glad I'm a missionary, not a millionaire. He leans back, and with that in mind as the backdrop, he leans forward and he said, this is what I'd say, basically. Do it again, Cunningham. Do it again. No regrets. And I think from the time that we moved to Cambodia, or even the time that we started on our journey with YWAM, there's been lots of ups and downs, but we've tried to just be a people that are all in for Jesus. And that's what we want to live, is just all in. And when we live all in for Jesus, then there's no regrets.
We want to do it over and over. Oh,
yeah.
So good.
So,
Caroline, what do you think?
I think for myself, honestly, as a 21-year-old, there's still a lot of fear of man in me.
Yeah.
There really was. Okay, if I made this choice, if I went to go do a DTS and then I go do an SPS, what are people going to think of me? And not doing the normal route of going to university and getting a job, doing something proper with your life.
Yep.
And I would say, Caroline, just don't have that fear of God in your life. Like, have the fear of man in your life. Have the fear of God in your life. And be faithful to that.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever that is.
So good.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say to myself.
Can I drop this in there? Just
if she doesn't mind, because we both have to go to the bathroom.
Okay, yeah. Just related to fear of the Lord and the call of God on our lives. This flew out of my mouth like a couple of years ago. And I thought, this is from the Holy Spirit, because it's way too good to have come from me. And basically is this thought: kill the fear of man in your life, or the fear of man in your life will kill the call of God on your life. And I just think that's the journey that he takes us on, right? So
good. Well, Akun Mak. Some Kamayan time.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Chandra Akun. I love you both. Thank you so much.